I want to start this deep dive with a little visualization exercise. If you can, just close your eyes for a moment, clear your mind. Now, I want you to picture a robot.
Okay.
But here's the constraint, and it's a big one. Wipe away all the images of shiny factory floors. Forget Boston Dynamics. Forget sci-fi movies set in the year 3000.
We are going way, way further back.
Much further. I want you to picture the bright blue Mediterranean Sea. The sun is beating down. The timeline is maybe 400 BC or even older, stretching back into oral tradition. You're standing on a beach, and you look up toward the cliffs. And there, marching along the ridge, is a giant made entirely of gleaming, polished bronze.
It is such a striking image, isn't it? Because it feels so anachronistic, like a glitch in history.
Exactly.
But when you actually read the texts, this figure isn't described as, a statue that was magically enchanted. It's described quite specifically as a machine, a designated programmed protector.
That's it. We are talking about Talos, the bronze giant. And the mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the argument that Talos isn't just another monster. He is, effectively, the very first robot in human history.
And a surprisingly complex one at that. When you dig into the sources, you find what are basically schematics, defense protocols, even a power source.
We've got a stack of sources today, from the Argonautica to treatises on ancient engineering. We're going to treat this deep dive like a campfire tale, but one annotated with engineering notes. We'll look at his design, his terrifying defense protocols, or eventually the system failure that brought him down.
What really stood out to me is the tone. Usually with mythology, we talk about magic and curses. But with Talos, the sources shift gears. They don't talk about spells. They talk about metallurgy, internal piping. They talk about fuel.
It almost reads like a technical manual, not a fairy tale. But to understand the machine, we have to start with the engineer. We have to talk about his creator, Hephaestus.
The god of the forge. And he is such an outlier in the Olympic pantheon.
Right, because while Zeus is throwing lightning bolts and Poseidon is controlling the oceans, Hephaestus is, well, he's working.
He's the blue-collar god. He lives inside a volcano, sweating over an anvil. But the key thing is that he wasn't just making swords and shields. He was an inventor. He was trying to replicate life using mechanics.
The notes mention he built automata. That word actually appears in the ancient Greek, right?
It does. Automatos acting of one's own will. The myths say he built three-legged tables tripods that could serve guests on their own. He even built golden handmaidens, mechanical women, to help him walk.
So Talos wasn't some kind of freak accident. He wasn't a one-off.
Not at all. He was the culmination of a long R&D process, the flagship model from the Hephaestus workshop.
And when you look at the specs, it is intimidating. A giant forged entirely from bronze, not born, but made.
And this is where the robot argument really gets its legs, the description of his internal anatomy. The sources are incredibly specific about how he worked. It wasn't magic dust inside him, not at all. They describe a single tube, or a syrinx in the Greek, running from his neck all the way down to his ankle. And inside this tube flowed ichor.
Now, ichor is usually just what gods bleed, a divine substance. But here, it's functioning differently.
Completely differently. In Talos, the ichor is basically hydraulic fluid. It's the motive force. Without it, he's just a statue. With it, the pressure animates the limbs. It's a closed-loop hydraulic system.
And like any pressurized system, it needs a seal. You need a cap.
Right. And the texts describe a single bronze nail. Sometimes it's translated as a plug or a pin inserted into his heel.
Which is such a fascinating detail. They didn't say a magic spell held the liquid in. They visualized a physical stopper.
It represents a concept any modern engineer would recognize immediately, a single point of failure.
Ah, right.
The Greeks seem to understand that complex systems are fragile. You can build an invincible bronze shell, but if it relies on one critical component to maintain internal pressure, well, that's a fatal weakness.
It's the exhaust port on the Death Star. That one little thing that can bring the whole house of cards down.
It is exactly that. It's the structural vulnerability you can't design away because the system needs an access point or a drain or a seal.
Okay, so we have this massive bronze hydraulic machine, but form follows function. What was Talos actually designed to do?
He was military hardware, pure and simple. He was a guardian asset deployed to protect the island of Crete for King Minos.
King Minos, the same guy from the Labyrinth and the Minotaur, he really had a thing for high-tech security systems.
He certainly did. Talos was his perimeter defense, and the patrol routine described is just It's exhausting to think about. He circled the entire island of Crete 3 times every day.
I looked this up. Crete is a big island. The coastline is over 1,000 kilometers.
Do the math. To circle it 3 times in 24 hours, he is moving at something like 150 miles per hour. On foot. Over rocky terrain.
That completely changes the image. He's not this slow, lumbering giant.
No, he's a high-speed interceptor. And he's tireless. That's the terrifying part. A human guard gets bored, needs to sleep. Talos just runs the loop over and over again.
So let's say you're a pirate. You're sailing towards Crete. What happens when the perimeter defense spots you?
Well, Talos had a tiered engagement protocol. First tier was long-range artillery. He'd rip massive boulders out of the cliffs and hurl them like a siege engine.
He could sink your ship before you even got close.
Exactly. But the close-range attack, what you call the thermal attack, that's where it shifts from a war story to a horror movie.
Okay.
It is truly visceral. If an enemy actually made it to shore, or if Talos caught someone, he could heat his own body up.
You could superheat the bronze.
Yes. The texts say he became incandescent, glowing red hot, and then he would grab the intruder and pull them into a bear hug.
The burning bear hug.
He would crush them against his burning chest. The sources even describe him grinning a fixed metal grimace. He wasn't just a sentry, he was an exterminator.
It just drives home that automaton aspect. There's no empathy, no negotiation, just the protocol. Destroy intruder.
And think about the symbolism. Hephaestus is the god of fire. Talos, his creation, kills with the element of his creator.
So this is the obstacle. This brings us to the main story. Enter Jason and the Argonauts.
The ancient world super team.
But by the time they get to Crete, they are not looking for a fight.
No, quite the opposite. They're on their ship, the Argo. They've already got the Golden Fleece. They've fought dragons, harpies. They are exhausted. They just want to go home.
But they're running out of supplies. They need water.
So they pull up to Crete for a pit stop. And they find the port is closed. Permanently. By a giant throwing mountains at them.
Can you imagine the panic on that ship? These are heroes, but you can't stab bronze. Arrows would just bounce right off.
It's a classic out-of-context problem. Their weapons are useless. Physical force is irrelevant. And this is where the story shifts from action to psychological thriller.
Because the person who steps up isn't the guy with the biggest sword. It's Medea.
Medea, the sorceress. She is, without a doubt, one of the most complex figures in all of mythology. And here, she represents a totally different kind of power.
So you have Talos, representing order, structure, mechanics, and Medea.
He's chaos, fluidity. She represents the mind, whereas Talos represents the body. She looks at this giant robot and realizes she can't fight the hardware.
So she decides to attack the software.
It's the first hack in history. In a way, yes. She realizes that even though he's metal, he has a link to the living world, that ichor, and she exploits it.
The sources say she used a combination of methods. It's not just one magic spell.
Right, she brews a potent potion, but the delivery mechanism is fascinating. The texts mention the aroma, the scent. She basically projects this hostile miasma towards the giant.
So it's an airborne agent.
Essentially. And she combines it with what the Greeks called the evil eye. She locks eyes with the giant, chants incantations. He's jamming his sensors.
And it works. The description of his reaction is so bizarre, he doesn't just shut down. He glitches.
He hallucinates. The source says Talos falls into a state of ensomniation, a dreamlike madness. He starts seeing things that aren't there. She completely disorients him.
The idea of a robot hallucinating is just fascinating. It implies that even a machine had some form of perception that could be corrupted.
That's a deep insight. To be a guardian, you have to perceive threats. That implies image recognition. Medea fed him bad data. She introduced a virus that caused a system crash.
And in that confused, stumbling state, the accident happened.
Yes, he's thrashing about on the shoreline trying to fight these phantoms, and he steps wrong. He strikes his ankle, his one vulnerable spot, against a sharp rock.
And that single bronze nail.
It pops out. The seal is broken.
The descriptions here are pretty graphic, even for a machine.
They are. The vital liquid just pours out of him like molten lead. It gushes out. And since he's a machine, there's no clotting. He just drains.
A total depressurization event.
Exactly. And with the fluid gone, the life leaves the bronze shell. With this massive, earth-shaking crash, the giant collapses on the beach. He turns from a guardian into just a heap of scrap metal.
And the Argonauts didn't even have to draw their swords.
No. They spent the night on the beach, probably just staring at this inert hulk of bronze, realizing they survived something they couldn't possibly have fought physically. They witnessed a battle between magic and engineering, and magic won.
I want to pause on that because this story is thousands of years old, but it feels incredibly modern. What does this tell us about how the Greeks viewed technology?
I think there's a deep-seated technological anxiety in this story. Talos represents power without a soul. He has a function, but he lacks independent will. He's programmed, and that makes him dangerous, but it also makes him brittle,
Brittle fowl.
in the sense that he can't adapt. He can only run his patrol loop. When the parameters change, when a sorceress uses psychological warfare, the machine fails. Humans are squishy, but we adapt. Talos is hard, but he breaks.
It also highlights that idea of the made versus the born.
Yes, exactly. Can you replicate life? And if you do, is it real? The fact that Talos dies when his plug is pulled suggests his life was artificial. It was contingent on that fuel, it wasn't inherent.
It's also amazing they anchored the weakness in the heel. We always think of Achilles.
It's a recurring motif, the idea that invulnerability is an illusion. Whether you're dipped in the river Styx or forged in a volcano, there's always a way in. No defense system is perfect.
You know, when we started this, I asked people to visualize a robot on a beach. And I think now the image is even more vivid. It's not just a cool monster, it's a tragedy.
It is. He was built to serve, he did his job perfectly, and he was taken down by something he wasn't programmed to understand. He's a victim of his own design.
So we've gone from the forge of Hephaestus to the shores of Crete, seen a giant burn people alive, and watched a sorceress crash his hard drive.
A pretty eventful journey for a stack of old papyrus scrolls.
Definitely. It really changes how you look at Greek mythology. It's not just guys in togas. It's science fiction before science existed.
I'd call it speculative fiction. They were looking at pulleys and levers and asking, how far can we take this? What if we could build a man?
And the answer was, if you build him, make sure you hide the plug better.
Or at least put a backup valve in place. Redundancy, Hephaestus, basic engineering.
Before we wrap up, what's the final takeaway? Why does this matter now?
I think we should look at the legacy. We are currently living in the age that the Greeks imagined. We are building autonomous drones, patrol bots. We are talking about AI hallucination.
We're living through the sequel to the Talos myth.
We are. The Greeks warned us. They told us that if you build a machine to protect you, you have to understand its limits. And you have to understand there's always a Medea out there, a hacker, a glitch, an unseen variable that knows how to break it.
That is a sobering thought, but a very cool connection. So here's a provocative thought for you to chew on. We like to think we are on the cutting edge of history. But if the ancient Greeks were dreaming up robots, hydraulic systems, and AI glitches 2,500 years ago, what other modern concepts are just hiding in these old stories, waiting for us to rediscover them? Are we inventing the future, or are we just finally catching up to their imagination?
That is the question. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Bronze Giant. We'll see you next time.